Hey, everybody, and welcome to, I guess, the fifth edition of Shank's online summer fun time hour, or whatever you'd like to call it. I'm sure you have other words for it, but here we are again. I hope you enjoyed your uh, holiday weekend, 4th of July weekend, and was still able to get some work done. And I had a good time. We went to the Akron Rubber Ducks game on Friday. It was a very nice way to spend the 4th of July, and they had pretty good fireworks there too. Um, Also, a number of you have been asking me about Chelsea. So the Chelsea update is that I'm finding out, like any good, healthy kitten, Chelsea has basically two speeds. The first speed is manic, crazy, 110 miles an hour, running around just being crazy. And then her second speed is sleepy, adorable kitty mode, where she's asleep on my chest or my lap or on my neck or whatever. Um, Nothing in between. It's either the first speed or the second speed. She has nothing in between. So it's kind of fun to see what kind of mood she's in. And you have to adapt one way or the other, as I think a lot of you who have cats know. So thank you for your questions about her, and I continue to enjoy your sharing pictures of your four-legged friends and family members in your emails. So keep doing that. A couple of things today. I think I'll probably make you happy. This video probably won't be as long as some of the other ones have been. I realize the last one was pretty long, um, but I had a lot to cover and talk about. This one probably not so much. So uh, I do want to wrap up our discussion of the Hunger Games by going over some of your answers to some of the remaining analysis questions that we didn't get to the other day, including your examples of uh, archetypes in children's literature today. Uh, and your examples were very, very good. And then also I have a list that I compiled of your answers to another question, which was, what are some really good uh, examples from fiction that would be good role models for young girls? And you came up, well, I kind of compiled a pretty good list of your answers to that question. And again, I can't recommend enough the website A Mighty Girl, which deals with this issue and gives wonderful examples. That would be my go-to website for that topic. And thank goodness over the years, there's been a real increase. There's been a real increase in the number of main characters who are great role models for young girls. So that's a trend that I think we all can support. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then I want to um, get into and preview and introduce folk tales as our last of the three genres we kind of put together. So we've talked about mythology. We're going to be wrapping up fairy tales on Thursday. And then as part of the trilogy, I guess you could call it, we're going to get into folk tales as well. And there is an assignment that I'm going to ask you to do, analyzing some folk tales. That will be due Wednesday by midnight, so before Thursday's video. And that's a pretty good transition into my explanation of the homework, which I'll do in just a second. But before I forget, this is also in the assignment, you'll see this. The midterm exam is rapidly approaching. It's something that you are going to be doing this weekend, and I will explain that in more detail in Thursday's video, but I wanted to call that to your attention. There is a study guide, so to speak, in the Canvas that I encourage you to look over for homework, because I'll be going over that in Thursday's video. And again, explaining the procedure of how we're going to have a midterm exam when it's an online non-synchronous class. So I'll be talking about that in the next video. But for now, let's explain the next homework assignment. There it is. And again, obviously, watch this video that's being posted on Monday, July 7th. Oh, and by the way, let's start with a number. Let's start with number 9. Number 9. And obviously take notes or take note of the number in sequence for my lecture and include that in your email to me with your assignment to get credit for that. All right, some readings I want you to do, folktale related. I'm going to give a little bit of an intro to folktales today, but there's some other supplemental reading I'm going to ask you to do. So in the packet in Canvas, read pages 107, A and B, and then pages 119 to 137. So you'll see that in the packet section of Canvas. There are 2 folktale related files in Canvas. What is a folktale, which I'm actually going to go over today and talk a little bit about today. And then there's also the folktale website. So please go on there and review the information in that file. And then, as I said, I do have a midterm study guide posted in Canvas that will explain the kinds of things that you're responsible for on the midterm. And I will review the study guide in my next video on Thursday. And then the midterm will be taken over the weekend. So I'll talk more about that on Thursday. All right, also another major announcement. If you are in the folktale, fairy tale, myth group of presenters, and that would be 4 students in that group, those written presentations are due before midnight on Wednesday. And I would encourage you, please, to meet that deadline so I can compile those and put them in Canvas. Because remember I said, and I'll talk more about this on Thursday, but there will be a question on the midterm regarding student presentations. So you are responsible for the student presentations. I'm currently getting in the picture book presentations, and I will have those posted on Canvas. And then I'd also like to have the folktale, fairy tale, myth presentations posted in Canvas so people can read those before the midterm. All right, so for those 4 of you who are in that group, those are due before midnight on Wednesday. And if you have any questions about that, please let me know. All right, there is a folktale assignment that I'm going to ask you to do. It'll be worth 30 quiz points, and I'm going to go over that in just a second. And oh, speaking of Chelsea, yeah, if now that I have Chelsea, if I'm a little late getting back to your emails, here's the reason. I can't get to my laptop. I mean, what am I supposed to do? I was helpless. So anyway, I can hopefully be able to keep her away from my laptop, so I can do my job basically. But anyway, I thought you might find that interesting. All right, so that's the homework assignment that's due before Wednesday at midnight. Let me explain the folktale assignment, and you'll see this in your Canvas. Now, I did something a little bit different this time around. In a normal class situation, what I used to do for folktales is I did the same kind of thing I would do for picture books. In class, I would bring in hard copies of collections of folktales. I would pass them out to small groups, and then I'd have small groups answer these questions in regard to the folktales that they were assigned. Now, ever since COVID, though, and the year I taught this class during COVID, I compiled a whole bunch of YouTube videos, each one showing some kind of animated version of these folk tales. And ever since that, I decided, well, this is kind of a fun way, and it's a little bit different than just reading a folk tale. So I decided to include and incorporate and keep the YouTube videos of the folk tales. So it's a different way of experiencing each folk tale. So here are the links. And you'll probably notice that I tried to pick a wide variety of folk tales from all different areas of the world, different cultures, so that you can see that, you know, almost every culture in the world have their own set of folk tales, obviously including American. There's a lot of American folk tales like, you know, Paul Bunyan and Johnny Appleseed and et cetera, et cetera. But, you know, there's Chinese folk tales, there's Russian folk tales, there's South African folk tales. I mean, it's every area of the country has them. So instead of actually picking up a hard copy book or collection, and this is especially convenient in a summer class, you know, you don't have to go to the library and look up collections and read them. I have the links to the YouTube videos here. And I'm hoping, I didn't have a chance really to go through each one of these. Sometimes, you know, the availability ends. So I'm hoping they're all available. If you hit on one that's no longer available, then I guess you'll just have to pick a different one. But what I'd like you to do here is, as it says here, pick any two of these folk tales that you find interesting or compelling for whatever reason. Maybe the title interests you, or maybe the particular culture interests you. And I would like you, I didn't put this down here, but I would like you to pick two folk tales, each from a different culture or country. So don't pick two American folk tales, for example, or don't pick two Chinese folk tales. Mix it up a little bit. All right, so watch the version, the YouTube version of the tale. And most likely it will involve a narrative, somebody reading the story while there's some kind of animation being shown as well. So it's like a moving picture book, so to speak. And I'd like you to answer these questions for each one of the folk tales. First of all, obviously identify what country and culture and time period the story comes from. Then be able to summarize in your own words the plot of the story. What's it about? Be able to do that in a few sentences, a paragraph. Then do a little bit of analysis. Are there any potential themes to each story? And I'm willing to bet there will be. Folk tales often have lessons to be learned or messages to impart, morals to the story for kids. So after you've watched the story and you have summarized the plot, is there something to be learned from each story? Is there a message, a lesson, a moral to the story? All right, then the next question is, analyze its appropriateness and relevance to today's child audience. And again, a lot of these stories go back many, 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 many years. Some may be more relevant to today's 21st century child than others. Some may be problematic because they're maybe too dated, but I'll leave that up to you to make that determination and do that analysis. So what would be the best age appropriateness for this particular story? And explain how it would be still relevant to a 21st century child reading the story or watching the video, since you're watching the video. Or you might argue that, you know what, this is not a story that maybe would be relevant to today's child, or maybe it might not be appropriate for maybe whatever reason or reasons. And this kind of leads into the last question. Did you find any weaknesses, any criticisms you have either of the story or perhaps of the video presentation? Because again, these are all YouTube videos. So do a little bit of analysis and criticism. You might love it. So you might say for this last question, I loved it. I thought it was a great representation. It was a very relevant story and interesting, timely, has great themes, and I loved what they did with it in the video. But if you had any issues or questions or problems, or if you think either the story or the video had any weaknesses, that would be the time to express your criticisms. Okay, so basically a 5-point analysis, and do this for 2 different folk tales, each one from a different country or culture. So I hope that's pretty clear. I think it is. If you have any questions, let me know. And then the second thing, this is kind of a fun thing to do, it always ends up being surprisingly challenging to do this. But I would like you to come up with a 2-line rhyme to remember that would sum up the story, the character, and/or the moral of the story, making it easy for a child to remember. So it'd be a 2-line rhyme. You know, the first line and the second line should rhyme, and you're kind of condensing and summarizing the entire story and message of the story in 2 sentences, and they rhyme. So give that a shot, and I usually have some fun with these, so we'll share these as well. And again, here are the ones you can look for. And again, just to repeat, I tried to pick a wide variety of folk tales from different places, so you get a sense of, you know, the idea of folk tales. And by the way, this is very important too. If you scroll down here, don't worry about this. We've already done this. I put this together in a different semester. So anyway, disregard this. This is the fairy tale assignment you've already done, so don't even pay attention to that. Okay, this is what I want you to do. Let me give you another number. How about 18? 18. And you might notice too, a lot of these are like origin stories. You know, folk tales often help explain things like, you know, how did the tiger get his stripes, and et cetera, et cetera. So those are always kind of fun to read, or in this case, to watch. So that's the homework for Midnight Wednesday and leading into our lecture on Thursday, our video lecture on Thursday. All right, so let's wrap up our discussion of the Hunger Games and mythology for kids. And to do that, I think the best way to do that is to share with you your answers to the question about where do we see some of these classical archetypes in other works for kids besides the Hunger Games. And so I compiled some of your answers. I didn't maybe do as good a job compiling these as I usually do. For example, I didn't include the names of the students this time around. And you might notice, and some of them are in different formats and so on. But it was the holiday weekend, so I just kind of cut and paste and tried my best to kind of make it look somewhat presentable. Not surprisingly, and I'm just going to kind of scroll through these a little bit, and you can read these on your own. And again, you guys did a wonderful job of this. Not surprisingly, a number of people mentioned the archetypes in Harry Potter, for example. But others, such as the House of Hades and the Magic Tree House, as the quest archetype. The Lion, the Witch, somebody mentioned the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which previews what we're going to take a look at. So be on the lookout for this. This person kind of gave us a little bit of, like I said, a preview of the story. There's the shadow figure, the outcast, the white goddess, the initiates, and the mentor. Again, Harry Potter is mentioned. Divergent has a number of these classical archetypes. Some that may not be as familiar in the Edge Chronicles. Avatar, The Last Airbender. has things like the hunting group of companions, the fall and that unhealable wound, the TV show The Owl House has a shadow archetype figure, also has the underworld represented. Again, Harry Potter and Divergent mentioned again. Of course, Percy Jackson was mentioned any number of times. Maybe the best example of mythology for kids. But I don't know. I don't know. I just kind of like the Hunger Games for other reasons. I like Percy Jackson too. Maybe one day I'll teach that book for this course instead of the Hunger Games, just to switch things up a little bit. But obviously, Percy Jackson has so many of these. And then somebody mentioned Dante's Divine Comedy. Um, it was Mac. I'm going to call you out, Mac. And yeah, it might be a little bit old for children, but Mac's determined that it would work for kids. So I won't disagree with him on that. I'm here to get along. I'm not here to argue with anybody. So here we go. Again, somebody mentioned Harry Potter and Percy Jackson, but then the Red Queen. Oh, by the way, Mac brought up Shrek the other day. If I have time at the end of this video, I'll go into my Shrek rant, so you can hang on for that. Let me give you another number too while I'm thinking about it. How about 44? 44. So again, Harry Potter, he's the hero, he's the chosen one, he's called into a magical world to face a dark evil. Dumbledore, certainly a mentor figure. Ron and Hermione are the loyal companions. I mean, Harry Potter, my God. Archetypes galore. But then this student also brought up Star Wars. You have the hero, the mentor, Darth Vader, the shadow, and the Lord of the Rings. Also, I know a lot of people are fans of the Lord of the Rings. Again, Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe was mentioned. We'll take a closer look at that book later on. The Lion King and the Wizard of Oz has a number of these classic archetypes. Here are a few that I was not as familiar with: the Owl House, Bamboo Kingdom, and the Guardian Herd. So I added those to my list of check it out books. The Mortal Instruments. Again, The Hobbit. Coraline. Love Coraline. The proto-feminist hero. We have a shadow figure there, the mentor, the threshold. Alice in Wonderland. Classic fantasy. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And this student went through each of those three works and showed how they had classical archetypes. So those were among the ones I got a few a little bit late, so I didn't have time to include them. But as you can see, even though, you know, these plot devices, we'll call them archetypes or plot devices, or, you know, stereotypes. I mean, there's any number of words for them, but we see them in the 21st century as easily as we saw them way back in, you know, centuries past. The Hunger Games is not the only one that borrows heavily from classical archetypes. And whichever book you chose to share with your children, whether they're students or your kids or grandkids or whoever, that might be a fun way to kind of introduce the story or introduce the idea of mythology and go from there. Like I said before, a lot of the original stories from myth were aimed for adults and have very adult themes, but we've seen over the years those archetypes be borrowed for more childlike fare, and to great effect. And I mean, there's probably 1,000 more examples we could list as well. So Yeah, I don't know. You might even do that someday. You might Google the term, classical archetypes and works for children and find out what you come up with. There'll probably be many, many, many more than that. All right. And then I thought I might also add, I didn't compile these in Canvas, but just as kind of a wrap up to the assignment that I gave you, here were some of your answers to who are good fictional role models for young girls today. And kind of a wide variety of lists, and it didn't have too many that were repeated either. So that was kind of a good thing too. But I'll just kind of run through these. Uh, this kind of made me smile. Nancy Drew, my God, Nancy Drew was around when I was a kid. Nancy, they still had Nancy Drew books and the Hardy Boy books. And of course, guys read the Hardy Boys, um, and the girls read Nancy Drew. So Nancy Drew, Tris from Divergent, Matilda, Ella from Ella Enchanted, good role model. Turtle from the Westing game. Obviously, in Harry Potter, Hermione is a wonderful role model for girls, but other people mention Ginny Weasley. I always laugh at this name. Um, I shouldn't, I guess, but Luna Lovegood always sounded to me like a Bond girl, a girl from a James Bond movie. Mr. Bond, meet Luna Lovegood, because Bond girls tended to have somewhat salacious names. Or maybe I'm just a dirty old man. I don't know. But anyway, so Luna Lovegood, Mulan, Princess Leia from Star Wars, obviously, Annabeth Chase from the Percy Jackson stories. Somebody mentioned Barbie. Certainly the movie Incantation of Barbie just came out a couple years ago. Wonderful role model. Merida from Brave, Luz Nacida from The Owl House, Elsa from Frozen. Although I can never think of Frozen, that was one of my grandniece's favorite movies when she was a little kid. And God, we had to hear, Let It Go, about a million times until I wanted to scream, yes, let it go, let it go. But anyway. And then a couple that I put little stars next to, might be a little bit too mature for the average child, but I let it go. Arya Stark from Game of Thrones, and 11 from Stranger Things. Uh, great character for, well, I would maybe 12, 13, 14-year-old girls. And a number of you mentioned Katara from Avatar: The Last Airbender. So all great examples, and they indicate the trend that I've mentioned of more and more strong main female characters, and of course, close to the top of the list, if not at the top of the list, would be Katniss Everdeen, the hero of the book that we read in class. So thank you for those examples. One last little comment on the Hunger Games, and this would be a discussion that we would have among adults, like we have it among us. I don't know that we would have it among children. As I've mentioned, I've also taught this book in my Lit for Young Adults class, so I think young adults might be able to have this discussion. But I was interested in your answers to how the work is criticizing or maybe satirizing our world and commenting on things that are going on that, like any work of good dystopian fiction, dystopian fiction usually warns us that, hey, if we don't stop doing the things we're doing, if we head down this road, this is what our life is going to look like in the not too distant future. And it's kind of scary. So maybe we got to get our act together. And again, I wouldn't lay that on a child in grade school, but maybe by middle school and certainly by high school, you could talk about it. And I always it always elicits a great discussion in a regular classroom. And I wish we could talk about it here one-on-one, but I'll just throw this out anyway. I always throw out to my students my hypothetical for what I would call Shank's Hunger Games. And here's the hypothetical scenario. Picture this. I'm a producer of a TV show. I have an idea for a TV show. Okay. and it would probably be on Fox. And it would probably be hosted by Ryan Seacrest, because he hosts all these things. And here's the premise of my show. We're going to go around the country, and it'll be like a combination of American Idol. This is what they do in American Idol. You know, they show tryouts in all the major cities in the country, and all these people try out for the American Idol. And they show, and those are the opening episodes of the show. We see all these people try out in different major cities in the country. And we would eventually pick 50 people from the country who tried out for my Hunger Games. And then we take these 50 people and we put them in a forest or a desert island or some kind of tropical place, you know, like they do in Survivor. You stick them out in the middle of nowhere with very little weaponry or whatever, just like the Hunger Games. And my idea for the show is, all right, it'll be just like the Hunger Games. It'll be a fight to the death, and everything will be televised. There's cameras everywhere, just like the Hunger Games. And the one difference is the winner, the survivor, so to speak, the one remaining person alive, will win $100 million. Okay, that's the basic premise of my show. All right. Now, I have one other difference between my show and the Hunger Games, and that is you have to be 18 years old. You have to be legally an adult. So we're not going to take any kids. Also, the other difference, obviously, is it's all volunteer. You know, nobody's going to be picked. Your name isn't going to be picked out of a hat or whatever. Nobody will do anything against their will. All this is totally volunteer. So basically, the premise is you can try out for Shank's Hunger Games. And if we pick you as one of the 50 finalists, we're going to stick you somewhere and you're going to try to kill the other 49 people. And if you happen to be the one who survives, you'll win $100 million tax-free. Now, I realize, you know, my show is probably is a preposterous idea that could probably never be on TV because of, you know, you'd have to sign all kind of legal waivers and whatever. We're talking about killing. But let's say you could, okay? It's a scary thought, but let's say the network gave me the go-ahead for this show, okay? 50 Americans killing each other off for the chance at $100 million. Now, I have a couple of questions for you. And this is the questions that usually elicit a lot of good discussion. My first question is, would you watch this show if it were on? And I picture it being like on a stream, 24-hour stream. You could stream it live. And then I also picture like each evening, like I said, Ryan Seacrest would come on and there'd be a 2-hour recap of what happened that day. You know, who got killed and how they got killed, and they'd have highlights and whatever. Now, would you watch that show? Now, usually, I'll tell you what usually happens in the classroom. Most people say, oh, Shank, no, that's horrific. I don't want to see people kill one another. That would be the gory and awful. And I don't find that entertaining and whatever. There are usually some people, though, who would say, yeah, I would watch that. I would at least be curious about it. So usually it's usually 80-20. 80% would say no, 20% would say yes. My second question is, do you think a lot of people would watch? And almost universally, the answer to that question is yes. And I would tend to agree. I think this would be the biggest freaking show on television. It would get the biggest rating ever, bigger than the Super Bowl, bigger than anything that's ever been on television before. Am I wrong? I don't think I am. And again, I usually pose it to the class, and the class usually says, well, a lot of them say I wouldn't watch it, but yeah, a lot of people would watch it. And in my dystopian scenario, it then forces you to ask the question, if that's true, what does that say about us as, I don't know, as a country? And I don't want to just pick on America. I mean, I think this kind of show would be big in any country. So it's not just, I'm not trying to be anti-American, but what does that say about us as human beings that we would willingly watch this literal fight to the death, like they do the Hunger Games? And by the way, it's not like Panem where they're kind of forced to watch the games. I wouldn't force you to watch it. If you want to watch Sports Center instead, or you want to watch, whatever, reruns of Gilligan's Island or whatever the hell you want to watch, I'm not forcing you to watch it, but I'm saying I think there'd be a big, big rating. And again, what does that say about us? That we've gotten to the point where we would watch something like that for entertainment. And I usually make the case that, how is it that much different than, I don't know, a lot of the other things that we see in our entertainment that's violent? But of course, we know it's not violent. But we watch the John Wick movies. Why do we watch the John Wick movies? Because we want to see how many people he can kill and all the different ways he can kill them in like a 2-hour span. The body count in a John Wick movie is like in the hundreds, and we watch that. And, we're not affected by that. I would argue as a producer of this show, this is just the next step. This is just the next step. We're actually going to have real life killings on TV. And I think it would get a big rating. And I think that's scary. All right. The other question that I usually pose to the class is, would you be one of the people in the country, and if you're all, I'm assuming you're all over 18, so you all would be eligible. You could go to your closest tryout place. Let's say they have it in all the major cities. So I guess they'd have a tryout place in Cleveland where anybody in Northeast Ohio could go to show, to maybe be interviewed or show some kind of skills, something about, something that would compel me to pick you as one of the 50 people. And like all these reality shows like American Idol and whatever, I'm sure, they would interview these people, and the people watching at home would get to know these people and know their stories and why they're doing this. But I'm asking you, would you try out? And before you say no, just remember the payoff's $100 million. I'll even, as a close-up, $100 million. Now, again, when I poll the class, I think almost everybody says, no, Shank, I would not, the odds are too high. I don't have skills. I'm not a killing machine. I would probably die the first day, like the Hunger Games. Even the lure of $100 million wouldn't tempt me to go to Cleveland to try out for this awful show of yours. But then my next question is, do you think a lot of people would try out across the country for this show? And again, when I ask it in a class, almost universally, everybody agrees with me. Yes, there would be lines out the door in every major city. I don't think I would have any trouble at all finding 50 people in this country willing to do this. The challenge would be to try to whittle it down from God knows how many. I would think thousands would, in every major city. LA, there might be 10,000 people trying out for this show in LA alone. And again, think about that and the ramifications of that. And what does that say about us? That so many people would threaten their own lives at the very small chance of winning $100 million, right? They would be willing to sacrifice their lives in the off chance that they might win this money. What does that say about us as a society that there'd be so many people willing to do that? And you have to ask yourself, why would they do that? And I'm thinking in most cases, it would be because people in this country, in the United States, in the 21st century, think that that would be their only chance at any kind of successful life, would be Shank's Hunger Games. Now, I know it's a long shot, but hey, it's $100 million. And I'm looking around at my life and I'm never going to have a chance at $100 million. And this is my chance. So that would be the kind of person, one kind of person that would volunteer. People who are destitute, people who have no other way of raising funds, maybe people who are looking after their elderly parent and they can't afford the health care, and this is a shot. This is a shot to be able to afford health care for their sick parent or their sick child, right? That's a sad commentary. I think another major type of person who would volunteer for such a thing would probably be those brave young men and women who served in the military and did their time and then came back and were trained to kill and now find themselves, pretty much forgotten, not only by the rest of the American people, but also by the Veterans Administration and et cetera, et cetera. And they would say to themselves, this is what I was trained to do, and I can't use my training as a manager at the local Acme, which is the job I have now. So what the hell? That's concerning. Plus, you'd get probably a whole bunch of crazy people who, for whatever reason, thought they had a chance. But that's my dystopian scenario. I'm kind of going the Hunger Games one better, or one, I guess it would be one worse, would be a better way of putting it. Would you watch? Maybe you wouldn't, but I think a lot of people would, and that says something about us, I think. Would you volunteer? Probably not. You wouldn't. And why wouldn't you? Because I have a feeling, most of you are young and you're going to college and you have goals and dreams and hopes for your life. So you're not going to throw all that away on the very small chance. But maybe, I don't know, some of you might have been in the service or whatever, but most of you are going to say, no, I have my life planned out. And, I hope I don't have any money now, but hopefully I'll get a good job, blah, blah, blah. So I'm not going to go and get myself killed. I'm going to make my plans for my future as best I can already. All right, so that's my little Hunger Games scenario. And again, that's not the kind of discussion I would have with, a fourth grader. But I don't know. I think it's an interesting discussion to have for maybe the older end of our scale, and certainly young adults who read the book. I don't spend a lot of time talking about the love triangle between, Katniss and Peeta and Gale and those kinds of things. These are the kinds of things that interest me, the kind of questions that this story and this whole scenario prompts. And again, what does it say about us that, the Hunger Games is not that far-fetched a concept, scarily enough. And because it isn't, that's something that should give us all a little bit of pause. Let me give you another number here. How about 32? 32. All right, let's talk a little bit about folk tales. And you are going to be, well, watching some versions of various folk tales for the next assignment. And so I thought I would go to the one web page that I wanted you to look over for today, just as kind of an introduction. I thought this was a really good introduction. Really does it better than I could have done it. So again, if I were to ask you basic criteria or characteristics of a folktale, this would be a good website to review if I were to ask that on a midterm exam, for example, Or those of you who are in the folktale fairy tale myth group, if you are presenting a presenting a folktale, including click on the link to common characteristics of folktales. And if you do that, you'll notice that, a lot of them kind of repeat or are very close to qualities and characteristics of what makes a good fairy tale. This would be an interesting one if you are a prospective teacher. I think these are two important links to look forward to, why folktales are important. So please check that out if you haven't already. And then the folktales for kids give a whole bunch of examples that you can take a look at. And, just to do a little mini lecture on folktales, we talked at the very beginning of the semester, the very first day of class, we talked about what are, the goals and benefits of literature for children. And certainly, generally speaking, folktales can achieve a couple of different goals and benefits. One, it seems to me, would be the development of empathy for others who are different than us. So one of the things I think children can gain from reading, say, a Chinese folktale is to get a little bit better understanding of people from, millions of miles away, not millions of miles away, but you get the idea, who have very, very different experiences than we do, live in a very, very different place, have their own cultural icons, have their own stories to tell. And we can have empathy for them. We can learn about other cultures as well. So, children tend to be, very isolated, and their world is only as big as, their neighborhood and their school and their house and whatever. But as they get a little bit older, and reading opens up a whole new understanding to them, and they begin to realize, hey, not every kid lives the kind of life I do. Not everybody lives in, suburban, Northeast Ohio, America. There are different people from different parts of the world, and they're all equally interesting and valid and important. And we should be empathetic toward them and be interested in them. And that's one of the most important lessons I think a child can learn, is that, hey, you're not the center of the universe, and there are other kids out there who live totally different lives than the kind of life you live. And you should be interested in that and learn from that. You should learn about other cultures. Another benefit of reading folk tales is, we all, unless we're Native American in origin, all of us in America have come from somewhere else, right? So maybe if you have, if you're from an Irish heritage, for example, learn a little bit about your predecessor's culture, or if you're an Italian American, or it goes on and on and on. What does that mean when your father or your grandfather or your grandmother or your great grandmother, tells you about how you should be proud to be Irish, or proud to be Italian, or proud to be Polish, or proud to be of Chinese ancestry, or whatever it is? What does that mean? Well, one good way to learn, especially for a child, is to read the folk tales from that particular region. Familiarize yourself with the stories that were told in your native country, and learn from them, and be validated by that, so that if there are other kids who, make fun of you or put you down or look at you differently because you are from a different origin, or your family comes from a different origin, or you're not first generation Americans, or whatever it might be, or you're a first generation American, but again, maybe your grandparents or great grandparents came over here from another country. It can be validating. It's like, oh my gosh, I was tempted maybe even be ashamed of my culture because people put me down or make fun of me or call me names. But through learning about my culture through folk tales, I'm empowered, and I feel validated as somebody from this area. So that can be an enormous benefit to reading folk tales for kids. And another benefit, obviously, is that we get the chance to live perhaps vicariously through these characters from different places and different time periods. So what would it be like to live in China? What it would be like, what was it like to live in India? What's it like to live in Africa? What's it like to live on the, in Alaska, or wherever, you know. Once you have a curiosity about the world, folk tales is a wonderful introduction to the stories that can help you learn about that. So I think reading folk tales can achieve any number of the personal goals and benefits that we've talked about early on in the semester. Is kind of our checklist for what we're looking for. All right, let me give you one last number, 16. 16. Like I said, this is going to be a relatively short video lecture. That's really all I have. We'll talk more about folktales on Thursday after I've read your analysis of the folktales that you've done. I'll also probably talk a little bit about the picture book presentations that are coming in, and I'll share those with you from the students. And hopefully I'll be able to maybe share in class on Thursday some of the folktale, fairy tale, myth presentations as well. So hopefully I'll be able to compile those by the time we have our Thursday video. So we'll have a little bit busy. We'll have a little bit more busy video on Thursday than we had for today, but this was kind of a little bit of a transitional video. And so anyway, you can turn it off now, or if you want to hear my Shrek rant, here we go. Okay. I'm going to try not to get too upset. Okay. Usually people will talk to me, students, ever since this movie came out, what, 20 some years ago. But how many Shreks have there been? Like, is it like Shrek 20 now? It seems like there's like 20 of them. And I heard they're planning on making another one. And my main question was, why? Why do we need one more Shrek movie? Maybe Eddie Murphy is running out of money and he needs another paycheck or whatever. Anyway, by the way, this is all kind of a tongue in cheek, but don't be offended. Don't call your congressman and say, Shank's an un-American, he hates Shrek, so let's deport him. But anyway, I've only seen the first Shrek movie because I couldn't bear to watch the other ones. So don't even tell me about the other ones. I don't want to know about them. I don't care about them. All right, my Shrek rant is this. The first Shrek movie I thought was wonderful up to a point. All right, what is the plot of Shrek? All right, the original plot was ugly, ugly ogre falls in love with the beautiful princess, right? Basic plot, okay? Nothing new. I mean, we've seen that scenario. Talk about an archetype. Talk about star-crossed lovers. Okay, fine. It's not an original idea, but it's fun. And the best part about it is, for me, was that the beautiful princess also falls in love with the ugly, ugly ogre. I love that. That's a great positive message for children, right? It doesn't matter what you look like, as long as your heart is pure and loving and you're kind and gentle. And I know, he was an ugly, ugly ogre and he had some irritating qualities, but all of those irritating qualities hid that inner, oh, I just dropped my phone. See, things are starting to happen already. All right. I love that. That was a great idea. You know, beautiful princess doesn't fall for some, Prince Charming or whatever. She loved the ogre, right? Okay. Here's my problem. How does that movie end? Does it end that way? Do the ugly, ugly ogre and the beautiful princess walk hand in hand into the sunset or get married or whatever? Hell no, we can't have that. What's the twist? What's the payoff? What's the climax? It turns out that she also was an ugly, ugly ogre. And by the end of the story, what happens? She returns back to being an ugly, ugly ogre. And then they walk, I don't know, what do ogres have? Like paws or whatever. They walk paw and paw into the sunset. The end. Happy ending, right? Okay, why? Why is that the happy ending? Why can't we just, for once, have the beautiful princess fall in love with the ugly, ugly ogre and leave it at that? It gives hope to all of us ugly, ugly ogres out here. And by the way, let's face it, most of us are closer to being ugly, ugly ogres than we are to being beautiful or handsome people. Why not just once? But no, we can't have that. The message of the movie instead is ogres, you stick with ogres. You never have a shot at the beautiful princess. And by the way, I don't want to make this sexist. I can flip the gender, right? Just once, can't we have like, the handsome prince fall in love with the beautiful, fall in love with the ugly, ugly. See, I messed up because we can't have that. Why can't we have Prince Charming, handsome Prince Charming, fall in love with an ugly, ugly ogress, right? Or, same sex, same thing. Can we have an ugly and the no? In the world of Disney and kids, no. Beautiful people, handsome people, they stick. If you're handsome and beautiful, you stay with handsome and beautiful people. And if you're an ogre, if you're an ugly, ugly ogre, stick with ogres. Okay. Now I'm all upset now. I've just ruined my Sunday going over this. I hope you're happy, Mac. You brought this up. So anyway, all right, if you stuck around for my Shrek rant is famous. You ask any student who's ever had me for either lit for young adults or a children's lit or my honors colloquium. They know it. And I don't know, somehow I was kind of able to restrain myself. When I'm in front of a classroom of students, I really go off and I usually end up jumping out a window, but I'm okay. I'll calm down. I'll have a scotch or two and I'll be just fine. So anyway, but did anybody ever think of that? Do you ever think about that? Why is it the happy ending that the ogres have to be together? And I'm not even going to get into, the dragon and what was the dragon and Eddie Murphy? I won't even get into. They got married. What the hell was that all about? But oh, holy crap! How does that happen? That's got to be against a few of nature's laws. But anyway, I won't even get into that. Why can't we have an ogre win over somebody that's beautiful and let that be the happy? All right. Anyway, so take care. Oh, by the way, if you happen to agree with me, you might make note of that in your email when you send in your assignment. If you disagree with me, I don't want to hear from you. because you're wrong about this. Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you then on Thursday for the next video. If you have any questions about the assignments or anything, feel free to email me. And again, one of the things we'll do on Thursday is I will be talking about the midterm exam, which you will be taking again in your own time. Well, actually, you have a 24-hour period to take it. It will be next Sunday, but I'll talk about all of that on Thursday's video. All right, so thank you all. See you later.